Assemblywoman Lipschutz, let's start with the proposition that New Jersey's experience, at least the publicity they've received, the negative publicity, has sullied anybody's efforts to promote casino gambling in New York. As far as you've discerned, is there a bum rap on New Jersey? Is it as bad as we hear, or worse?
No, on the contrary, I think it is much better. And I think your key phrase was the adverse publicity it has received. It seems to be, for reasons unknown to me, a very favorite topic of the New York press to bring out the so-called adverse effects of casino gambling in Atlantic City. When you speak to the Atlantic City people involved, and I don't mean the casino operators and owners, I'm talking about governmental agencies and representatives and the business community, you get an entirely different picture. In fact, to let you know, even as late as yesterday, I have received a letter from of all things, a memorial chapel operator in Atlantic City, refuting that so-called Massachusetts report that is being bandied about right now.
What is that?
Well, I think Bruce will be able to tell you more about that one.
It's an anti-casino report, is it, Bruce?
It's a factual report which tilts against casinos.
Well, the point that the question is factual, apparently, from the people in Atlantic City who are being quoted in that report. I'm getting unsolicited testimony in the mail that they're using the word outright lie.
I'm sorry, I've got to dispute that. The fact of the matter is that there should be a statement arriving from Massachusetts in Assemblyman Passanante's office today, which is going to basically take that criticism and simply shoot it right back to pieces. The Massachusetts Legislative Research Bureau stands behind every statement in there, and I know that they're going to settle this whole thing very quickly now.
Well, why not use this information and the experience of New Jersey and whatever probity you can discern it and better New York's entrance into casino gambling?
I think it'd be a mistake if New York went into casino gambling. I don't quite get what you're trying to say there.
Why? Well, are you basically against it because of the possibility of the criminal element and this
exactly what we're talking
ancillary
about.
Effects?
As far as we're concerned, casino gambling creates tremendous new opportunities for organized crime to flourish and for street crime to run rampant. Now, I know the pro-casino people keep saying over and over again, the crime problem can be controlled, and they say there's no danger. I don't believe them. I don't think anybody else ought to believe that. And I'm going to base that on expert testimony on the subject. Let me quote from a transcript from a legislative subcommittee, May 5th, 1978. I'll tell you in a minute who the witness was, but his conclusion is this. It seems to me that organized crime infiltration into legalized casino gambling will be a very significant problem, which is not likely to be solved by regulation or law enforcement. Well, that was a pretty strong statement, so the committee chairman, Mr. Lentol, picked him up on that, and he said, I get the impression in your testimony you feel it's virtually impossible to keep organized crime out. Am I drawing too much from your testimony? And the witness replied, I think that's exactly what I said. The witness was Ron Goldstock. He was then director of the Cornell Institute on Organized Crime. He was recently appointed by none other than Governor Carey to head the New York State Organized Crime Task Force. And that's exactly why we say casinos mean mobs.
Well, that is a typical hysterical statement, and if we want to quote, I can go into the same records of that subcommittee hearing, of which I was the chairperson even then. Mr. Lentol at that time was the chairman of the Standing Committee of Governmental Operations, of which the subcommittee is a part. And I can give you quotes just to the contrary by equally fine people with very fine reputations in the field. We can always extract quotations from anything to suit our purposes. I do believe, and your question is very well taken, that New York State can and has already learned a great deal from the Atlantic City experience and has the capabilities and the talents to deal with them in an anticipatory fashion as well as in an actual fashion. New York State has always been one of the outstanding leaders among all of the states in the Union in the law enforcement area. Our reputation happens to be an excellent one. I don't want to denigrate a sister state, but we certainly have been superior to New Jersey all along in that area.
Is the key to making casino gambling clean getting proper license license holders who are pure from the day one?
Well, that's one of the components. I would say, first of all, New Jersey made a tremendous mistake when, and I understand why they did it, but it was a mistake nevertheless when they granted temporary licenses. That should never happen. It should never have happened. It certainly would not happen in New York. Also, the profile of the gaming industry has changed since the inception of the thought of casino gaming for New Jersey. Certainly since the inception of Vegas. There are different people now interested in casino gaming. When we talk about the Hilton Corporation, we're not talking about a mob-connected outfit. And when we're talking about Holiday Inn and Horn and Hardart, we're not talking about that kind of operation. And it is about time that New York State and the people who really mean to increase the economic benefits for our state realize that. It is an entirely different story at this time.
Well, look, let's try and keep this thing in perspective, though. The first 3 companies that went to the Casino Control Commission for a license
In New Jersey.
in New Jersey
Okay.
were turned down by the Attorney General's office in New Jersey. Resorts International, Caesars, Bally. Why? All 3 had had some kind of organized crime connection, at least in the past. So we begin now with 3 companies in which the
But we're
Attorney
not
General's
talking
office
about
says,
New
hey,
Jersey
they
now.
shouldn't be given a license.
We are talking about New York, and these 3 companies have not come to New York. But Hilton has shown interest, and Holiday Inn has shown interest, and Horn and Hardart does show an interest. So we are talking about an entirely different group of people in a very highly reputable hotel industry.
But even if you get companies into New York that are as clean as the driven snow, I still say we're going to have a crime problem. And I think you've got to keep going back to New
There's no
Jersey. It's
question.
right there now.
There's no question that we have to anticipate and to prepare for it. And I have more confidence in my own state than apparently no dice we love New York has.
Well, the reason I quoted Mr. Goldstock in particular is that Attorney General Abrams said, we do not have the capacity to deal with the organized crime problem.
That's
Then
why
you
an admission by
conspicuously
our
pointed out
Attorney
that, in
General.
effect, Mr. Abrams, one, had no business, coming on as strong as he did. The governor is chiefly
No, no, no.
responsible for
No,
law
no, no.
enforcement.
I'm not saying that, Bruce. What I'm saying, look, anyone has a right to his opinion, and I'll respect it and I'll listen to it. What I objected to with the Attorney General was his methodology. The Attorney General was petitioned by me and the subcommittee as I think at least 2.5 years ago, after, even longer perhaps, after the New Jersey experiment started. I was fully aware at that time that the New York State Attorney General does not have as broad powers as the New Jersey Attorney General does. And I went to our Attorney General at that time, and I met with him and Mr. Ali, and I had my counsel with me. And I said, look, there is a possibility this thing is going to develop for New York. I know about the curtailment of your office. I'm fully prepared to work with you to develop legislation that will enlarge the powers of your office, to seek more funding for your agency, and to prepare for that. There was no response to that. As late as the first week of March of this year, the subcommittee asked the Attorney General to come before it to discuss again problems that we anticipate and how to cope with them and what to do when we come to the point of drafting and enabling legislation. There was no courtesy of a reply. The response was a 25-minute news conference, and that's exactly what I resented.
Let's back up from New Jersey to Nevada. How do you view Nevada's situation regarding casinos?
I haven't been there. I've been
Comparing
to
it with New Jersey's.
I haven't been there, so I can't really be, purely fair about it. The only thing I can tell you is look at Las Vegas in particular. You've got the same problems that you have in New Jersey. Highest crime rate per capita in the nation. It's the pawn shop capital of the nation. Leads the nation in the incidence of suicides. Leads the nation in alcoholism. As far as I'm concerned, what Las Vegas and Atlantic City are telling me, in fact, the New York Times said the same thing. There is no such thing as casinos without trouble. And I don't know why we want to bring that trouble to New York State.
Again, the two sites that you refer to, Vegas and Atlantic City, are not at all indicative of what will and can and should happen in the state of New York. In the state of New York, we're talking about at least 5 different sites simultaneously. We're talking about 5 specific resort-oriented sites. We're talking about an urban experience, which certainly neither Vegas nor Atlantic City are. We are also talking not about a concentrated mass of people in just one specific area. And incidentally, speaking of that, I mean, when we when No Dice cites the increase of street crime, inordinate increase of street crime, you must remember that the base population, for instance, over Atlantic City was roughly 60,000 people. You quadruple that on a daily basis, and proportionately, you have more crime. I mean,
I was going to bring that up. When you talk about drugs, prostitution flocking to these areas, you're talking about a venality that predates Dice, certainly, and sometimes man standing upright. You're never going to wipe that out, no matter what you ban, are you?
I don't even think that's the issue, Bill. Let's
Well, that's
pick
one
up
of
on
the
her
points
point.
you point
All right,
out
no,
in
let's
the
pick up on her
brochure,
point. Let's just say that I was a resident of the Atlantic City area, and I've got a home down there, I've got a family I'm trying to raise. All I can say is since 1978, when Resorts International became the first casino to operate down there, and today, there's been a tremendous increase in larcenies, auto thefts, drug dealing, the whole shebang.
you have 350,000 people there every
What's
day.
the difference if I'm the homeowner who's got to be adjacent to this, and this is our concern
Well,
in
there
New York
is
State?
no home adjacent to Resorts International that I know of.
Well, adjacent, I mean, that's a loose
Well,
term.
okay.
Because I'll quote the Atlantic County executive, who lives 10 miles out of Atlantic
let
City,
me
who
say
says
this
that
to
life
you.
has become hellish where he lives out in Brigantine.
Well, Bruce, look, it depends whose ox is being gored, all right? Let me say this to you, that Atlantic City, prior to the advent of casinos, and bear in mind that though the casinos are concentrated in a very small area there, but prior to the advent of casinos, Atlantic City was a dying, if not dead city. I mean, I was there prior, I was there during, and there was no hope of anything. And the people that are moaning and bemoaning the fact of the advent of casino gaming in Atlantic City are precisely the same people that made absolutely no monetary contribution to the well-being of that city. They were a drain on that city. They certainly didn't contribute toward it. And crime has been in existence there prior to the advent of casinos, and absolutely no financial wherewithal to deal with it. Prostitution is here, prostitution will remain here, and prostitution, incidentally, is being very much a contributing source of revenue to all of the unsavory characters that No Dice wants to ascribe to casinos.
If loan sharking, prostitution, and drugs are three crimes that follow where flocks of people go, isn't it rather simplistic to say if you don't have these, you won't have them? In
No,
other
you're going
words,
to have more of it for
if you
this reason.
separate
You've got to
people into
remember
small
that.
groups,
You've got to remember,
it says.
casino gambling is different from anything else in this sense. Do you realize that every day in Atlantic City, enormous amounts of cash are being exchanged? I'll simplify the whole thing. Every minute in Atlantic City, $3,000 in cash is being moved around one way or another. Now, wherever you've got that amount of cash, you're going to wind up having an awful lot of people trying to get their hands on a hunk of that cash one way or another. And that's our point. It is a lot different from
Isn't it
every other
strange?
kind of enterprise.
Isn't it strange that presents absolutely no problem in Europe, where casinos have flourished for hundreds of years? Hundreds of years. Monte Carlo, Biarritz, Baden-Baden, all of them. Casinos are not a detraction there for their resort industry. Casinos are a major attraction for the international crowd of people. Casinos in Baden-Baden, and incidentally, that's a privately owned, one-man owned casino, 200 years old. Casinos there not only attract business and tourism, but a casino there takes care of municipal needs, contributes parks, contributes clinics. I mean, these things that No Dice seems to predict, these dire events, have not happened for many, many, many years of experimentation. So why become so hysterical about
You're
something?
talking about a totally different thing, Mrs. Lipschutz. What you're talking about are the so-called London snob club
No,
type
no,
of things.
no,
as if we're going to
no,
have a whole
no,
bunch
no.
of Earls of Sandwich sitting
No,
around,
sir.
you know.
I wouldn't even mention the London snob clubs because they're contrary to our constitutional requirements.
That's my...
I am talking about international, well-established for centuries casinos, and which have no restrictions. The only restriction Baden-Baden has and Monte Carlo has, when you are a foreign visitor, you must register your passport.
Sure, you
That's
got to
it.
make an appointment 48 hours in advance.
Not
You
true.
have to be
Not
identified and
true.
all that sort
there,
of thing.
I was there 2 years ago. I made no
Well, that's
appointments.
basically the European pattern.
Well, I was in France, and I was in Germany, and I was in Holland, and I was in Belgium, and I made no appointments anyplace.
Well, we're talking about a totally different thing because you're talking about, in effect, the jet set types and Arab
No,
sheiks
what
and so
I'm
forth
talking
going to play at
about-
these nice clubs. We're talking about something entirely
what
different here.
I'm-
The
no.
casinos are going to feed off average working people in New York State.
No
the
way.
people that go down there and they're
Look,
buffing their
let
car
me
and
say
blow
to
a
you,
boodle.
New York State can bring in a class act if people let it. We don't have to have the honky-tonk stuff that goes on in Vegas. I certainly wouldn't want to have that happen. New York State has the ability, has the sites. That is the interesting thing. We have the sites which are crying out for it. What alternative do you have to offer to Niagara, to the Rockaways, to Long Beach, to Coney Island? Do you have any alternatives? These communities are hanging on by a thread. This is their only hope left. And people who live up here and God knows where else, who know nothing about these areas, have the gall to presume to say to those people, you have no right to hope. We're taking away your last vestige of hope of survival. I think that is terribly presumptive.
Let me talk about a Ralph Salerno comment. Ralph Salerno being a one-time assistant Queens DA, consultant to governmental committees, organized crime. He says the major flaw in America in casino gambling and keeping it clean is the Constitution. Because
Thank God for the Constitution.
He says you can't keep out the disreputable types because they'll form dummy corporations and keep coming back at you, and if you deny them their rights, they'll go to court, and somewhere along the line we'll find a judge who will let them operate. Is that a too cynical a view?
Yes, it is, and I certainly am very grateful that the United States does have a constitution with its protection for all of the people of this country. And if it does mean there are occasional weaknesses that occur because of it, we have enough legal instruments to deal with even that. And his argument is specious anyway, because what he's complaining of occurs in all forms of business.
Yeah.
I think we said that before this program started. I mean, one of the biggest problems with arson today in our urban centers is that we cannot find the actual landlord or owner of the building because he's hidden by layers and layers of dummy corporations.
Yeah, I think there's something that's got to be brought out here. I think you're trying to say that the casino companies are just like any other company that's in business, more or less, and that is something that is
I'm not talking about casino companies. I'm talking about very, very reputable hotel industry people.
Let me then get in this quote because I think it's important. It comes from Mickey Brown, who's the director of the Division of Gaming Enforcement in New Jersey. And what basically he has said, casino operators want to be treated just like any other business. Well, they are not any other business. They are unique in the purpose they serve and the threat they pose.
They pose absolutely no threat outside of perhaps a threat of competition to what is already existing. I'm going back to the statement I made, it depends whose ox is being gored.
Let me, you know, we talk about organized crime here, capital
right.
O, capital C, as Superman.
Yeah.
And that we acquiesce to it the minute the word comes
That's
up.
right.
It seems,
Bill.
and this is not, I don't want this to be construed as any kind of a comment by myself on casino gambling because I have no interest one way or the other, but can't we say we will keep crime out, we will control it, then they won't run our lives?
It can't be controlled. Bill, don't minimize this organized crime thing. We're talking about, in effect, an industry in its own right. Organized crime, according to the Justice Department, owns at least 700 companies in this nation. According to congressional testimony, it could be up to 10,000 companies. Organized crime has got its fingers all over the place, and they're playing hardball to get what they want accomplished. And they're also involved in the unions, and that's an important thing which you've got to
So
keep
you
in
mean
mind
to say,
here.
Bruce, we're going to, as Mr. Duffy just said, we're going to sit there and cower in fear and let them inhibit any kind of progressive action and attitude we want to take? I'll be damned if I would subject myself
This
to
is
that.
exactly why I come back to what the Attorney General said. It's going to take at least 5
The
years to
Attorney
toughen
General-
up the Organized Crime Task Force in New York State to deal with the problem. We've got 20 paid professional staff on that crime task force. In New Jersey, they have 400 people.
So we have the wherewithal to do that too. The Attorney General happens to be a political candidate, which is another story. It's, you're right. We should not cower in a corner with hysterical fear. When we talk about organized crime being involved in, let me tell you something, I'm sure you know, City of New York loses $1 billion a year in the illegal numbers game. Who's that supporting? Where's that money going? We're talking about organized crime.
I don't want to turn this into a treatise on Cosa Nostra, but
I'm not an expert
anything
at
that
it.
has two people involved in concert is organized crime. Are we talking about a monolith, separate organizations?
As a matter of fact, organized crime experts aren't even exactly sure how monolithic or how fragmented organized crime is. What they do know is that a mob war is going on right now to gain economic control of Atlantic City. Governor Byrne has said that. The governor of New Jersey goes on for television cameras and says he can be sure 6 people at least have been killed in a fight over the turf in Atlantic City.
So in New York City, people are constantly being killed. There's still a great big warfare going on about what has happened with the importation of drugs at Kennedy, and I don't want to go into that. I mean, please, if we want to build a red herring, and if we want to create a bogeyman for a very, very interesting promotion of self-interest, we all can do it. My underlying theory is this: there are areas in our state that need an economic shot in the arm. They by tradition have been resorts. This is the kind of thing that they would like to have. There is no viable alternative for it. And the bottom line is all this legislature should do is respond to the constitutional requirement of our state to bring this issue to a referendum. Now, I don't think that is such a horrendous
Would you like
thing.
it not even to be voted on by the people?
I don't think that's the question. We, right now, have 8
That is the
resolutions that were acted upon by the legislature last year. They are before the legislature this year for further consideration. We're going one step at a time. We are dealing with whether or not the legislature is going to approve casino gambling under the provisions of the Constitution. That is the issue right now.
That is not the issue. The legislature is not approving anything if it lets one of those resolutions come out as a referendum. The legislature would then be complying with a constitutional requirement after due deliberations. And Mr. Duffy said it. For how long? Since when has casino issue, the issue
For
being?
at least 15
Okay.
years. And on
Due deliberations.
that note of time, we're out of it. We'll
Okay.
be back right after this.